Hey, welcome to a new episode of Last Call Baseball, number 132. I'm Dorian. We are on the cusp of the end of the regular season. And I just read that Felix Bautista, the stud relief pitcher for the Baltimore Orioles, is going to have Tommy John surgery. He's been out for a couple of months. And I also had been thinking over the past few months, the problems that the LA Dodgers are going to have, the Baltimore Orioles are going to have, the Texas Rangers when it comes to starting pitching, all those teams. The Houston Astros, they lost Luis Garcia earlier this year. Lance McCullers is going to not coming back until next year. And I thought, well, the Braves are going to make it easy. It's going to actually be even easier to get to the World Series this year. But wait, pump your brakes, because Max Fried has been in and out for a while. Charlie Morton will not pitch in the National League Divisional Series, and we're going to hope that Kyle Wright regains his regular season form from last year. We hope that Spencer Strider pitches better. And then I'm like, holy schmoly, all the teams in the playoffs are going to have pitching problems. So then I flipped and I thought, the key to going deep in this 2023 postseason is probably just going to be crazy offenses. So I'm going to predict there's going to be some really high scoring games, I think higher than we would normally think of in the playoffs, just because of the quality of pitching for all the teams, whether you're the Atlanta Braves or you sneak in like potentially the Miami Marlins. There's not going to be enough good pitching, and some of these offenses are beasts. So here's my final World Series prediction. I think it's going to be the Atlanta Braves representing the National League, and even though they haven't clinched yet, the Toronto Blue Jays from the American League. And the Braves are going to win the World Series in 6 games. We're going to see what happens in about 5 weeks. We got rid of our crystal ball a while ago, but if we had a really smart computer like artificial intelligence, we could just feed it all the information of the regular season, all the historical playoffs, all that nonsense, and say, hey, computer, who do you think is going to win? And our next guest is going to talk about some artificial intelligence in the realm of art. This week, our special guest is Tim Raines, an abstract artist, not the master of stolen bases. Tim, welcome to Last Call Baseball.
Thank you very much, Dorian. Appreciate it.
Tim, you used to be a tech salesman. What would Tim, the salesman from years past, tell now Tim, the artist, about artificial intelligence?
That's pretty random question, but interesting. I think that AI is transformative for art, and I'm positive about it. And I teach at a local art college for entrepreneurship, actually. It's definitely going to disrupt the industry, but I feel like it will open the doors for creatives, especially animation or VR, AR, to become their own bosses, lead a studio, compete with Disney. All of those things that would, today require 100 people. It's back to the 80s where you could make, Oregon Trail software all by yourself and create a game company. So I think it's pretty cool.
As we know, I think right now, just a few days ago, the writer's strike was finished. One of the issues, not just because of money, the residual royalty money, but also the fact that the studios could just pump the scripts and everything else into a machine, obviously doing its machine learning things, and then it could pop out like, say, give me a Adam Sandler like movie, and there would be like no money. And it worries me, as if people like you, and I also have friends who are visual artists and graphic designers. Who's to say that someone can't use your work, pump it into a machine to do its machine learning, and then say, give me something in the form of Tim Raines?
No, it's, this is what, the philosophical questions I talk to other, the department heads at the college and the students is, from Henry David Thoreau to artists to musicians, they've said, stealing is a part of the game, 20, 40, 100 years ago. We build on each other's creativity. and we bring our own personality to it. And I follow a number of artists online. I've always appreciated fresh art. It feels like it, I don't know. I've seen new things now and then. I think since AI has come out, I've seen such good art in the past year that is partially AI derived and generated. And, I think the ones that I like do their own touch up and modification afterwards, but it's astounding. It's creative. It's bringing in disparate ideas that haven't been done that I've seen. So my top artist follows right now are AI artists, honestly, and I really like what they're doing.
That's interesting. Tim, I originally invited you to come on specifically because you had done work a while ago doing the logos of all the baseball teams. But before we get into that, how did you become an artist? Because as I mentioned at the top of this conversation, you were a tech salesman. And then again, I don't want to say transformation because I'm sure it was already always inside of you, but what was that spark and what was that constant influence and inspiration of like, I'm okay doing this, but I want to go do that being creating art?
Yeah. So good question. The progression was as a kid, from drawing as early as I can remember. My dad was a pretty good artist. Grab the Highlights magazine and do some art. And it grew from there. When I got to high school, my teachers encouraged me to be an artist. I didn't see a pathway to a career, certainly not one that I was passionate about. And so I looked at what relatives were doing for careers, and sales was the way to go for me. And so it sat kind of on the shelf, and I would get burned out of art pretty quickly. It was intensive. It was drawing, realism, not abstract. So after I had made a few bucks in that world, and I had a nice loft I wanted to decorate, I put some canvas on the ground I saw art around, and I'm like, I could buy art. I want to support artists, but I can do that. And so I just started throwing paint, doing different things, putting art on the wall to cover my own space, affordable in my own creation. And then I had neighbors in the complex that were like, "Who did your art?" Well, I did. And they said, "Well, I'd like you to do one for me." And so that went from just pure abstracts to going, well, this is pretty cool. I was dropping the paint. That's how I do it. I put the canvas on the ground, I drop it, and I started doing I was like, well, where can this go? So I did a flower. I'm like, that's really cool. And I go, well, I can control this pretty well. What does that mean? And, so two passions, baseball and automobiles, exotic cars, especially. So I'm like, well, let's see if I can do a Ferrari horse, and I'll do a New York Yankees logo. I'm a Texas fan, but, Yankees are Yankees. They're a classic. And I did that. I sent it to a licensing agent. He's like, I love it. He sells art, had an MLB license for art. I was the only abstract artist at the time. And he picked me up, and he goes, you got to do all the logos. No one can do this. Like everyone does a Mickey Mantle or some famous realistic drawing, but no one's doing Robin Yount for Milwaukee Brewers. And so the small market teams don't have art collectibles. They don't have these things. This is huge. And that's kind of what Major League Baseball said when he sent them samples. They said, we want all of these. We want all the teams. This is excellent. And, they ended up putting a poster or a print, of all the teams in the New York headquarters and Dominican headquarters. So it was a really cool opportunity that developed that way.
I strongly encourage everyone to go to look up your work and your website, which we'll get to later in the conversation. The way I would describe your artwork that I've seen, as well as what I've read, how other people describe it, it's almost like raindrops. It's like the reflection of raindrops. It's like the reflection of a puddle of raindrops.
That's really well described. Yeah, it's I kind of think of if you picture Pollock painting, you've seen the movie or whatever. It's kind of how I look doing it, but then it has the effect of stippling or Seurat kind of art where it's dotted. So it's a little combination of both. But yeah, it ends up looking like raindrops, which fits my last name well.
Very, very well done. We mentioned that you did the logos in your interpretation for all of the, not just for Major League Baseball, the corporation, but as well as the teams. What team or teams did you find most challenging in the sense? Obviously, you said you're a Texas Rangers fan, but when it comes to like the color palettes and just some of them have like animals, which one did you enjoy most? Is like this is going to be really this is going to be more challenging than other team logos.
Yeah. Yeah. So with this, dropping from 6 foot tall, and I do a range of drops depending on the style. We don't have to get into that, but it's hard to be accurate, as you can imagine. So anything complex, let's say the St. Louis Cardinals, is when they gave me the license. They're like, well, here's the PDF of all the approved logos, and that of course includes travel logos, secondary, primary. Their primary logo, I wanted to do as many times as like every team as possible. Some of them were just difficult, and you've got the Braves hat on. That was pretty difficult for a primary logo. But that's what I wanted to do whenever possible. So I'd say the Cardinals was the most difficult, but it turned out amazing. And that one ended up at an auction with Carlos Beltran for his foundation, which was an awesome experience to be with the team the year after their 2013 World Series, and hanging out with the team and doing a whole auction like that. It was fantastic. So that's probably my favorite. But I think like anything in life, the more hard work you put into it, the more valuable it is to you.
On this podcast and in my personal life as well, I rail against the uncreativity of not just Major League Baseball, but the major sports team. That's major sports organization. Case in point, now that we're about to get into the postseason, it's a celebration week. So all the teams, they spray beer, champagne, and they all have that same hat that says postseason, in it to win it, through fight for October, all the silly little slogans that Major League Baseball comes up with, air quotes, and all they do is just plaster the team logo on it. I've always been a proponent of having teams hire local artists like yourself and saying, look, if we make it to the postseason, could you design something specifically for us when we clinch a wild card? If we make it, we win the pennant, we win the World Series, because it's just so uninspiring. And I'm wondering is how, without still being diplomatic, how difficult is it to work with a major corporation like MLB and saying you cannot deviate from this, as opposed to me, I'm like, I would love again for teams to individually go out and when someone commissions an artist to do something.
Yeah, wow, so much there. I got the opportunity to do the Budweiser can for Tampa Bay, which was one that they did graphic artists. Typically, I was probably the only abstract artist that did cans for every team, and they were all local artists, supposedly from each team region, and that was great. And the can looked amazing. But yeah, I think that's important. Kind of, if you know anything about the way things are done, they make two of everything, Super Bowl as well. That we're going to have the winners of both, so that the very minute the game is over, we can sell this. The rest go to Africa, and it's just like there's so much money involved in that. If you gave even a small stipend to an artist at every, at the top, at the postseason teams, that gives them plenty of time to prepare something, put some money in the pocket, and then it's ready to go, so they can still activate their giant network of manufacturing and knock it out once the game's over. And so I think that's a great idea. And it is difficult, I think, to work with them. One of the things about having abstract logos is they like what I did. But my first Cubs logo I did prior to getting the license for a friend, and it was offset, so part of the C was cut off. I just thought it looked really cool in that example, so I submitted it, and it was rejected because it wasn't a full logo, or whatever, and that's fine. I did another one, but then I guess what is it, like 2 years later, I'm watching ESPN, and all of the MLB logos are like hacked down to a third, like kind of for juxtaposition off to the side, and I'm like, so ESPN can do it, but I can't. So whatever. It'd be nice to have a little more freedom, but I'd say more than anybody, NFL is difficult. NHL, I've done individual work with teams. They're pretty open-minded. Baseball is really good to artists, I would say. They're pretty open. Some artists I know now have individual licenses, which is difficult to do. So they've been pretty supportive of smaller businesses, I think.
That's brilliant. That's the first time I've heard of that. I am a big fan of art. I'm a big fan of baseball, and I love it when they come together like this. You obviously have come across this where your name is Tim Raines. You have worked and still work in baseball in some capacity. You obviously some people I'm sure confuse you with another Tim Raines. Tell us how in the world you ended up on the Miami Marlins alumni email list.
Yeah, I guess it's an easy mistake. I don't know how or why they found me. I guess the whoever runs that at the Marlins organization decided to Google when they didn't have background information. And Tim Raines, I don't think, has a website. Even after the Hall of Fame, he doesn't seem to be much for social media, and that's fine. That's great. So I guess they were just really wanting to be a part of the organization. So I got an email one day and said, welcome to the Marlins Alumni Association. We have this event coming up. We'd like to see you there. I laughed, messaging back, said, hey, this isn't that Tim Raines. Appreciate the nod. He's like, oh, that's really crazy. He goes, you want a Marlins jersey anyway? I'm like, sure, send it to me. So ever since then, I'm still on the Marlins email list. He's never taken me off, and I should take advantage of that, shouldn't I? I don't know what I can do with that, but
you probably can ask for a couple of game tickets when you're ever in Miami, maybe for like Art Miami or Art Basel.
That's a great idea.
I love going to Art Miami and Art Basel in December. What better place to go? Well, you're already in Florida, but again, what better place to be in December, at least in the United States, than Florida, escaping the horrible winters. Speaking of jerseys, you had said that the Marlins sent you a jersey. Did you have a chance to see the Texas Rangers City Connect uniform that they unveiled this year?
I saw they had a throwback uniform this year. Was that the T and the R?
Yes.
Together. Yeah.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was interesting. I didn't recognize them as the Rangers when I think I saw it. I was out at a restaurant. I'm looking up and I go, well, who is that? And I'm pretty used to MLB and all the sports now changing uniforms to sell merchandise, every game. So it wasn't a surprise, but I did not know that was the Rangers by looking at it. It was quite a complex logo for T and an R. I think it was cool overall.
Yeah, I'm up in the air on that. I think there's a handful of very good City Connect uniforms that Nike has come out with, and that's another thing that also, going back to what I said about MLB, I am not a fan about Nike leading the push for the City Connect to basically, the concept of the City Connect is to ground the team in the community, but you're basically, I may be speaking out of turn here, but I think it's just a bunch of graphic designers sitting in Portland or wherever in the world Nike is, and again, not hiring local artists. I think some of the uniforms are atrocious. Most of them were. The Atlanta Braves being right up there, as much as I'm a Braves fan. Anyways, I can keep going on and on about that because it just bothers me. You told us about.
I think what bothered me the most is, and I don't follow college football that much, but it's that's when I first noticed this Nike, and I will blame it on them. I think you're right to blame it on them because it started with the Oregon. Is it the Beavers or whatever?
No, the Oregon Ducks, University of Oregon, because that's where Phil Ford.
Yeah, they got off with radiance and then changing the uniform every other week. It just reeked. I'm a traditionalist, so I apologize for that. That's why I like the Yankees in a lot of ways, and others is the pinstripes, or in football, just having the number on one side of the helmet for Alabama. It just all of a sudden you saw all these colleges dropping their traditional uniforms for that. And baseball, I think, has done it a little better. But yeah, there's been some bad mistakes, and it does seem to be driven by the money more than the design. And and that's why I think having local artists, local designers, it would change the game. It would be nice.
You spent some time there. It's awesome. It's known as a creative city. You told us that you were drawing from a young age, when you were much younger, obviously in a different time before being a tech salesman. Where does your love of baseball and the Texas Rangers, and maybe even how excited you are about the Rangers' possibilities in October as well?
Good question. I probably, I started just like a lot of kids, I guess, that I got into every little sport as a little leaguer and all that. I liked baseball pretty well. I think once it started getting to pitching faster, I was a little bit scared of that stuff. So soccer became my thing for playing, but the Tim Raines connection kind of really cemented the baseball love because people in high school would go, Tim Raines, the baseball player, as a joke. And I really decided to follow Tim's career, and it was great. I enjoyed the attention in that way. And in baseball, I was closer to Houston, so I probably spent half the year in Houston and half the year at the Rangers ballpark. So I've always liked it. I like the thinking of it. I like the statistics. I guess that's the tech part of me. But I think I saw something like 1.2 million outcomes every at bat, or something ridiculous like that. And I like the statistics. I like that whole thing. I like the movies. I like everything about it. I don't know why it's a special sport to me. It is American. It's the quintessential American sport, the pastime, of course. So it's in my blood, I guess.
Are you going to be watching any of the Rangers games in the playoffs?
As much as possible. I would, I think kind of like anyone that's in this job. Who was I talking to the other day that was doing baseball? Oh, my kid's in Little League, and he's got a batting coach who's here in Florida who's sent a few players to the major leagues. And I asked him what his favorite team was. I was going to give him one of my prints. He goes, I don't have one. I've got players here, here, and here. And that's kind of how I feel. It's hard for me to say I have a favorite team. My dream is to take my kid and do the family clinic at the Yankees because it's right up the road and no one else really does that I'm aware of. And of course, the famous men's fantasy league with the Yankees would be the real dream. So that's really cool. I love the Astros and what they've built. It's frustrating to see the Rangers not win a World Series yet. We had the one chance and they really blew it. I like the Brewers. I like small market teams. I love their logo. The best stadium I've been to is, I think, the Nats. I mean, not from a design standpoint or anything, but the party deck when all the interns from Congress or whatever show up in their
the Budweiser place in center left field. Yeah, I've been there.
Red's Porch.
Right.
Yeah, Red's Porch, being at Camden Yard. I don't know. How can you pick just one? There's so many great experiences in baseball.
And all those teams are going to be the playoffs: the Rangers, the Orioles, the Astros, with the exception of the Washington Nationals. But
yeah.
Continuing on in baseball, if we were to say, Tim, we're going to take you away from the art world for a little bit because we need your help in Major League Baseball. If you were to become the new Major League Baseball commissioner, what's one or two things that you would do to change the game in the way you would want it? In anything from rules, from spending, anything you want, because you are now the new Major League Baseball commissioner.
Well, it's an interesting question. What I've had been getting burned out on the whole corporate MLB, monopoly. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. Just some of the things that are frustrating. I think this year has been really exciting. I think they've turned it around. The Rays, my local team is the Rays. Going there now, there's actually people in the stands, and I hear that that's the way it is across the country. That attendance is up. Things are more exciting. There's more stolen bases, so they're doing an okay job. I think what I would bring to it, without being silly and sounding stupid, but it might be more of a minor, like putting money into the minor leagues and opening the door a little more for competitive leagues even, is bringing baseball back to America on a regional and city basis. What the Savannah Bananas are doing is just absolutely excellent. I know in Texas, there's some small market semi-pro teams now that are kind of coming up with the hipster vibe. I cringe to think I'm into hipster stuff at my age, but they're wearing kind of, the vintage uniforms. They have creative names. It's got that Austin roller derby girl vibe. People show up, they drink beer, they know the players interact with the fans. I think that's kind of what's missing. So I'm glad to see MLB turning it around, but I would probably put my money into creating, bringing baseball back to truly being a big deal in America. And I think what teams like that are being more creative, that are being more local focused, is where it's at. And you don't have to be slapstick, but that's something that's their thing. Having players that have personality that connect with the fans are kind of required to some extent to be almost like actors in a play. I don't think it's a huge ask, but build some personality, be a part of the community. I think that would be cool to see as an expanded minor league type of system.
I do like that because I think there was a contraction of minor league teams down to the current 120. I think it was before the 2020 season. Obviously, this was before all those decisions were taken before the COVID pandemic. I think that the minor league teams in existence, I think the majority of them do a really good job of being obviously competitive, but also being a little silly to make it more family friendly. And for the most part, you can walk, especially talking about the Florida League, which I think is more difficult. And I'll get to that in a second. But I do like, as the most part, you can just walk up and buy a ticket for $5-10 any night. Every night they have some silly thing. The kids run the bases. You get hot dogs for $1. Take a picture with the mascot. I like all that stuff. My issue as a baseball fan as a whole, because I love World Baseball Classic, minor league, the Latin American leagues, like just baseball, is the translation from minor league, where it's so open, to major league, where you go for paying $5 for a ticket in major league, where you have to pay $30-40 to sit in the nosebleed section. And then it's going to cost you $100 to take a family of 3 or 4 to the game. That's, I think, it's just that gap is so wide, I think. And minor league baseball can help fill that, but there's a difference in play between watching high A in the Florida State League with the Sarasota, the Bradenton Marauders, close to where you are, the Dunedin Blue Jays, the Clearwater Threshers, the Tampa Tarpons, the Yankees high A. That's what bothers me. And as well, in the Florida State League, is it rains all the time. For the thunderstorms come down for about an hour every single day, and the games are unplayable because there's no roof, there's no covering.
Well, I think baseball should always be played outdoors, but that's a different subject. I think it's a tough one because I wish I knew more about the finance. I didn't understand that lots of like modern sports is all about the TV. I'm involved in motorsports also beyond baseball with my art. They don't necessarily, from what I understand, care too much about the ticket sales or how many people show up, because their money's made on the TV and the sponsorships in that way.
And now it's all gambling money as well, which is, I think, not to be a preacher, terrible. But that's just
that flow to MLB. I don't like the gambling money, or
that the gambling money, and the gambling money flows to the owners and Major League Baseball. It does not flow to the players, as well as a lot of the teams are now their stadiums are just converted to like real estate games. They're just real estate owners, where they're building out, like in Washington, they build out that whole area around the Nationals, and the same thing with Atlanta. They have that whole hotels. All that money stays with the owners. Yeah. It's basically it's just baseball teams fronting as real estate companies fronting as baseball teams.
Right. Yeah. Which I've been to the new Braves stadium. It's great, but it does, it's like taxpayer dollars fund the, owners to have real estate and make leasing money and all that. Yeah. I would like, if the truth is that they make money in these other ways, then why not fill the Tropicana, which it's, now it's busy, but I mean, it's not filled. When I went to the playoffs last year, it was packed. Like I couldn't even get a ticket except for my nosebleeds. Those nosebleeds have always been covered with canvas, every time I've been. I mean, I've been to games where there's 11,000 people and the Yankees were the other team, which, if you know anything about Tropicana Field, more than half the attendance is going to be the other team because no one's from here. So when the Yankees show up and it's only 11,000 people, that's terrible. But, that's changing. But why not sell, drop the ticket price to pack it? Especially if your money's coming from these other, TV revenues or gambling or whatever it is.
I think in the specific case of Tampa, they should have moved to downtown. And I know they just made those announcement that they're going to build another stadium in the gas plant district or whatever. But if anyone knows anything about Tampa Bay area, everyone works in downtown Tampa. It's not. I don't think it's conducive to be building another stadium in downtown St. Pete, as beautiful as it is, because it is beautiful. Tim, I don't want to hold you for too long, but I certainly appreciate your time. When us as baseball fans want to go to art galleries in the Tampa Bay area, or in the Bradenton area, or go to spring training, what do you recommend good local places that you like to have a drink, coffee, food in the Bradenton, Sarasota, Tampa area?
Great. Yeah. So if you're doing spring training, I highly recommend catching the Pirates and then walking across the street to Motorworks Brewery. Fantastic. Some of the best beer in this region. And
Is that new?
it's been around a few years.
Because I went to the Pirates like 5 years ago, and I don't think there was anything across the street. And it's a great stadium.
Yeah, so
But go
maybe
on.
probably around that time. Must have opened just right after you, but it's got huge oak trees, nice patio, live music, good food. If you're in Sarasota with the Orioles, there's Sun King Brewing, which is based in Indianapolis, but they've got a branch here now. I like Calusa for beer, food right there. There's some, it's not in the best neighborhood, so you probably just end up going downtown. For Tampa or for the Tampa Bay Rays, high end. I love. Well, there's great breweries everywhere. I think Green Bench Brewing or Three Daughters, and then food wise, I like brick and mortar for kind of high end, really creative, interesting stuff. Hawkers is right there, which I think is becoming a
I was
national.
just about to say Hawkers. I really did like that place. I went there a few years ago.
Yeah, and I Mark's place. Gosh, what am I saying? He would probably not be happy if I didn't remember mentioning. Oh God, now I can't even think of it. What's the Mark's for the big sports bar right there by the stadium? Ferg's, Mark Ferguson's place. Yeah, Ferg's. So if you're pre-gaming, Ferg's is awesome. I think my giant Budweiser beer can is still sitting there, sun faded in the parking lot. So look for that when you're walking to the game. But yeah, you got to go to Ferg's pre-game for any kind of sport.
I do like how in St. Pete, right, we're in that same area where you had mentioned Hawkers. That's been recently developed where they have a boatload of new restaurants out there, and there's also a really good ice cream place out there that's escaping my name. I do want to say one thing about Hawkers though, that it was good food. I was disappointed because I thought if you have or anyone listening has been to Singapore, Hawkers is just like the stalls. And so I thought that it was just going to go up and be able to order one dish from like three different stalls, and it was just a restaurant that sold like Singaporean hawker. That was my only issue with Hawkers, because again, I had that Singaporean thought but it's really good food in that whole area, which is you can't really walk from there to Tropicana, but it's a really short drive to where the Rays play.
Oh, you can. That's walking distance. It's right there. Just about. I mean, it's a bit of a long walk, but there's
As long as it's not
yeah,
113 degrees in like July.
that are raining, which is almost
Exactly.
always about that time of day.
Exactly. Tim, I want to thank you for your time. I always love talking to creatives, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Let us know where we can
Yeah.
find your work online and also potentially buy any of your amazing pieces.
Oh, sure. Unfortunately, my gallery in St. Pete is closed, but that's okay. Online is really where everything's at these days. So timothyrains.com, because Tim Raines was taken, but not by the baseball club.
Thanks to Tim for joining us this week. And this beer that I've been drinking in this episode, it's called Transverse. It's an autumn ale because it's basically autumn now. It's from a good American local brewery called Torch and Crown Brewing Company in the Bronx, New York. It doesn't really agree with me because I think even though it said it's autumn ale, it's too hoppy for me. I can't stand hoppy beers. I hate IPAs. This is not an IPA, but it's like a IPA adjacent. So it's good, but I think it could have been better because again, when I see ale, I expect a certain taste. And it's incredible that this year, there's going to be no playoff teams from New York. The New York Mets obviously have been out for a while. The New York Yankees officially were eliminated, I think, when they lost on Monday at home against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I loved it. I was rubbing my hands with glee, not because I hate the Yankees or the Mets. It has nothing to do with that, because I can't stand ESPN. And I thought, oh boy, what is ESPN going to do? How infuriated are the television schedulers on ESPN, because they cannot now put the New York Yankees at the prime time playoff spot every single night to be playing at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The people at ESPN are pulling their hair out if it has not already fallen out. They're like, oh my God, the Yankees are in. They're probably petitioning Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, to cancel the postseason. And I would even say that they've talked, those dummies, those bozos at ESPN, saying, I'm just completely making this up, of course, they probably want to play classic New York Yankee playoff games. They want to show these from, 1999, 1998, when they were winning all those World Series, as opposed to actually showing the 2023 postseason. God forbid they put the Atlanta Braves on at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or the Texas Rangers, or the Baltimore Orioles. I love it that the Mets and the Yankees are both out, because ESPN are on their knees crying tears of blood. I love it. That being said, I'm going to have one more drink from this Transverse Autumn Ale beer. And I want to thank you for listening to Last Call Baseball. Be great and get home safe. Enjoy the playoffs, the most exciting time of the year.